Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Tim Hamill and I'm the industry strategist for auto finance here at Ernix. And I thought before we get started today I might share a little bit of my background. I've been with Ernix almost a year now, and prior to that I spent 20 years advising auto companies on ways to improve their return on their marketing investments, and really have worked from the very top of the funnel all the way down through the very bottom of the purchase funnel with manufacturers, dealers, and auto finance companies in trying to identify opportunities for them to modify the marketing process in order to improve number of conversions as well as ultimately lower the cost per acquiring new customers. And today what I'll be doing is sharing insights in three different areas. The first is talking about, in general terms, of how advanced analytics is being used in the auto industry to improve marketing profitability, both currently and some of their future plans, but also where do auto finance companies fit into that picture and how can they leverage their connections to improve their situation. And then thirdly is both short and long-term steps of how auto finance companies can improve their profitability by using advanced analytics. And I think when most people look at buying an automobile or selling an automobile, they kind of sympathize with the consumer as if all these major, big auto companies and dealers and finance companies are beating up on the consumer, when in fact, after having worked in the industry for a long time, and you might consider this a jaded point of view, but I think it's kind of a balanced point of view. I'm a little bit more sympathetic towards the auto side. When you consider that, essentially they make one of the most sophisticated products available today, and probably today I would say safely one of the most reliable products. They have to work very, very hard in order to earn their fair share of profits. And it's unlike some of the other industries like high tech and so forth, where if you make a great product and kind of get distribution, it's all of a sudden, the profits, you don't even have to worry, they start flowing in. So I kind of look a little bit maybe sympathetically towards the auto side. And there's really sort of four key factors that drive that challenge. And the first one is that auto companies and their finance arms or indirect lenders as well and dealers have to make an enormous investment in upfront marketing. And two is that investment is over a very long period of time through a complex sales process. Some experts say that people start shopping for vehicles 2-3 months out, and I've found in research we've done is that it's actually could be upwards of 18 months out. And what you need to do is kind of catch the consumer at the beginning of the funnel and keep them in your funnel, otherwise they'll end up in someone else's. So it becomes kind of challenging to keep that communication rolling and so forth. And there's an extensive marketing investment made along the way. And then when you consider margins in the auto industry compared to others, it's a relatively narrow margins at virtually for every stakeholder, and they're obviously booking on making up in volume, making their money that way, but they have to manage margins very carefully in order to ensure that they're actually making money on every deal. And then sort of the fourth piece, which is I think of critical importance, is that you have many different stakeholders along the way over that 18-month period that are touching the consumer, and each one needs to or currently manages profitability on their own, and there are many different handoffs, so there's lots of opportunities to sort of lose control of profits along the way. And when you kind of look at it more specifically, I kind of picture, you've got these three core stakeholder groups. You've got dealers, you've got auto finance companies, and you've got the manufacturer, and each one of them is trying to maximize their profits along the way, and essentially, or in many cases, they're pushing against each other and don't even realize it. So while there may be enormous profits under the rock, so to speak, they're kind of pushing the rock back and forth and not revealing all of the potential profits that can be made. So this is kind of mentally how I visualize the challenge in what we're trying to do by maximizing profitability long-term for the different stakeholders. And when you take a closer look at sort of the investment side, and I'll take each one of those pieces I talked about earlier one step at a time, is, the average MSRP, including, finance charges, is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $36,000 to $37,000. A quarter of that, roughly $8,700, is spent in upfront marketing, and this is not the cost of operating a dealership or paying sales commissions. These are, advertising, digital spend, rebates and incentives, discounts on financing, et cetera. And so when you look at that, it's a fairly significant investment. And then when you kind of look at it on a industry-wide basis, based on, $16.9 million, and I think this year we're projected to far exceed that. Not far exceed it, but exceed it, is you're approaching a $150 billion a year investment in creating demand for new vehicles. So it's a pretty significant commitment up front that needs to be made before they make their money, so to speak, the different stakeholders. And then when you take a look at the process the consumer goes through in that each of the stakeholders participate in, you start to see this sort of twisty trail, and this, quite frankly, is an oversimplification of what happens. In fact, we have documented that there are as many as 72 different touch points throughout the customer life cycle, each by these different stakeholder groups here, but taking the consumer one more step down, sort of the purchase and repurchase funnel. So when you consider all the different people involved, from front-end advertising all the way through getting sales made in the dealership and financing and ultimately taking delivery, you have many different people. And again, the point being is that each one has slightly different objectives. In fact, we did a lot of research in auto dealership and with auto finance managers, and a couple of them have said, basically each party is in it for themselves along the way and tries to maximize their profits, not really looking at the big picture. How can we, improve profits for everyone across the board? So that's a real major challenge when we start looking at some of these things. And when you kind of dig a little bit deeper into where auto finance fits in, you take part of the track I just showed you and kind of blow it up a little bit. This is really what happens on the day of purchase, where auto finance comes in. And, there are many steps that occur before, people start talking auto finance. The consumer's arriving at the dealership, they're meeting with a sales rep, they're picking out their vehicle of choice, they're having their vehicle, essentially the trade-in evaluated. The sales executive then is meeting with the sales manager to kind of put a deal together, because he or she has talked to the consumer and has general sort of desires of what they want their payments to be, and et cetera. And then what they do is they present a preliminary deal to the consumer, sometimes on paper, that says, if we could do this, would you buy the vehicle today? So essentially the consumer is agreed to buy the vehicle if all the terms follow through on what they've put on the sheet, even before auto financing is considered. And then what ends up happening is the auto finance manager behind the scenes, and not really with the consumer, starts to shop to banks, different banks that can provide credit to the consumer. And so the consumer really isn't involved at all. In fact, this is sort of an ingredient in the process, as it is in most cases. That being said, the finance manager is sort of looking for a few things. One is the utmost is they want to make certain they can secure credit for that particular customer, and they will shop banks that they believe work well with that particular type of credit score, credit customer, and because their goal is to get them credit no matter what, because that's their primary goal, is to obviously sell the vehicle. But second to that is once they find the group of banks that they believe will, lend to this particular type of customer or work well with this customer, then the second and probably most important to them is the level of dealer reserve that's allowed, and which can range anywhere from on average of, $2,000 or $200 to $1,000, and so they will shop that piece. Then there are other factors like ease of financing and marketing programs that may be in place at that dealership with a particular lender. The point I think that needs to be considered is that this is somewhat of a subjective process. You may think because you're on DealerTrack or some of these other aggregators of lending activity is that you're getting a fair share. It's really based on what they're kind of looking for in the first place, and there's a preferred set of lenders that each dealership seems to have and that they shop for and are comfortable with. So what we end up often doing with clients is start to analyze types of customers that they should be doing business with, and identifying dealers that they haven't penetrated based on that type of customer that dealer's selling to. So you start to identify sort of open opportunities for maybe your sales team for the auto finance company to actually reach out and either do more or realign perceptions at the dealership, or do what they need to develop stronger relationships with dealers that are sort of hitting that particular lender's sweet spot. So that information in aggregate is helpful, although we'll be getting into some very specific things a little bit later. But that's one thing coming out of this that we've started to do as a result of these types of insights. Then, really kind of looking overall at sort of the analytic framework that's currently being used in the auto industry is these are 6 different areas of analysis that are typically done, everything from media mix optimization to data management platforms when they buy digital media, when advertising agencies buy digital media for either dealers or the manufacturer, or in some cases auto finance companies, is there's built-in analytics in that, and it goes all the way through lead purchasing, all the way through systems that are in dealers to maximize profitability for each one. The issue is not whether these are good or not. They're actually very helpful tools. The issue is that they're done in silos by different groups of people who are not sharing information across each piece. So when you look at it, it's a little bit like the 3 blind men describing the elephant, is that each one sees a different picture of profitability, and quite often some of these tools start to work against each other. So it's really fragmented analytics that we see as sort of standing in the way of maximizing long-term profitability or overall profitability for all the different sharer or stakeholders. And I guess the most important piece in looking at this is what it generates in the consumer minds when you have siloed marketing activities as well as siloed analytics. What you end up doing is maximizing the effectiveness of your particular piece, but then you're ending up sending messages out to the consumer that are shoddy at best. You have manufacturers who might be pushing rebates out in the marketplace, or finance companies who might be advertising low interest rates, or dealers are advertising their piece. And so all these things kind of get out in the marketplace, and they create a lot of clutter when the consumer is really looking for some simple things. They're looking for things like, I have a particular vehicle in mind that I wonder if I can afford, and there's certain types of equipment I'd like on that vehicle and certain features, and if I could figure out how I could squeeze that into my budget, I would buy it. So it's sort of like the vehicle features and payments that the consumer wants, not is there a rebate on it? Is there a low interest rate? Because they don't, want to do all that math and figure it out, and it becomes sort of a distraction for them. So that's another point in trying to bring all of this information together and simplify it for the consumer. And so if you take a look at what's sort of trending in the auto industry, is there's introduction of decision engines that are taking all of the sort of financial side of the picture from manufacturers and finance companies and dealers, and looking at that and trying to tie together all of that information with what they believe either on an individual basis or on a segment basis that consumers are wanting from their perspective, and then tying the right vehicle, the right time to solicit a particular consumer for that offer, the right message, and ultimately the right pricing, and taking that pricing and kind of packaging it in a way that the consumer will understand it easily. So in this case, it's a particular vehicle, particular trim level, and a monthly payment that the consumer wants. And we see that that is really sort of the direction the industry is going. So if you take a look at it and say, well, that's kind of a complicated undertaking, and will they actually do this? Well, we've worked with a lot of, or I personally have worked with a lot of automotive companies in evaluating what the potential rewards are if they actually could do this, and building the business cases to make the investments in order to build the decision engines. And if you take a look at sort of the reward, is we estimate that of that $8,700, you could trim off about $1,000 per vehicle in upfront marketing investment while doing basically the same volume. So if you take a look at it for a large auto manufacturer and finance, captive finance arm, et cetera, dealer groups, so a large auto will sell maybe somewhere between 1.5 million and 2 million vehicles a year in the U.S. Is you multiply that out and do the math, at $1,000 per vehicle, it's a $2 billion a year nut that they're chasing. So the important thing is that there's a big incentive for doing this, so it makes it worthwhile. Plus, it's right by the consumer. The consumer wants this. And if you take a deeper look at how this sort of infrastructure works, and this is a graphic I use to kind of, show sort of the big picture. There's a lot more detail behind these things, but essentially at the base you have all sorts of big data sources, well beyond what you may be thinking of with credit information, and you have all sorts of information that the manufacturer is bringing together, everything from website behavior and leads they purchase and prospect data and past customer data and segmentation, et cetera, blending that with with credit rather. And then, the actual dealer information that the dealer's accumulating, and then purchasing all sorts of third-party information, everything from leads to enhanced data to propensity models, people's likelihood to buy a particular vehicle or lease versus buy, and market demand data, et cetera, as well as they're now ingesting large amounts of digital or web-based data, behavior data that they can tie together. And then all of this information gets tied together. It gets warehoused, so that they, have accumulated this information on each consumer. Then the decision engine that I showed you earlier gets implemented, and then, ultimately they're pushing campaigns out and optimizing those campaigns to individual consumer segments or all the way down to the individual consumer. And then all of that's tied together in the upper level, which is through omni-channel one-to-one marketing, which is different than, blasting, everything out through every channel. This is actually sending specific types of offers in a coordinated fashion across different channels. So you might have somebody who's maybe direct mail centric, and you might be doing, a TV in that market, and also combine that with direct mail, but it's actually digital TV is emerging, where you can send personalized messages to individuals if you want over it. So it's getting quite sophisticated, but you're coordinating your message across those channels, and you know you're sending it to a particular consumer. So you can send different messages to different consumers with different offers, et cetera, through these different channels. So all of this, in our work with some of the major autos, is I can tell you that either they're in business planning on it, coming out of business planning on it, and or working on different pieces of it so far. While it isn't entirely built by any particular company, they're all moving in this direction. And I think it's important to see, okay, now how does auto finance fit into those different pieces? Because I think that that's important. Now for captive finance, you may be asked or may already be a part of teams that are looking at this. For indirect lenders, it's important to kind of get involved in this process and understand how it is being done, because this could almost create a closed loop where offers are developed, made, and extended to consumers even before they get to the dealership on a much broader basis than it's being done today. So kind of looking at this and taking a step back and say, okay, there's a bunch of pieces moving, what should we do? We kind of see developing a walk, run, and leap strategy for the auto finance side that gets progressively involved in what I've been showing you. And the very first step at improving profits for auto finance, and this applies to both indirect and captive finance lenders, is making certain you're taking advantage of two tools that are out there, refined and available today. And that is, one is that you're doing sophisticated loan price optimization, not things on spreadsheets, but using advanced analytics to do this. And then the second piece is making certain that you're doing the same level of diligence on asset disposal, because those are two sort of pieces of low-hanging fruit that could be taken advantage of almost immediately. And what I mean by that is really to set up these two operations and have them impacting your decisioning on lending and et cetera, is it's about 6 months to get it ramped up and out into the market and up and running and benefiting from it financially. And what we see is, for a major lender, this could have a positive economic impact of about $35 to $75 million a year in improved yield, based on, depending upon the size of your portfolio, et cetera, but based on a large lender. The second piece is a run phase, which it starts to focus a little bit more on captive finance and fitting into this bigger picture that I kind of showed you earlier. But there are roles for indirect lenders as well. But in the case of this, it's really ensuring that every one of the tools I kind of reviewed a little bit earlier are up and running, and you're taking advantage of it. But most importantly, you're aligning that directly with the outcomes of that with customer profitability. So you aren't optimizing in silos, you're optimizing collectively to generate the most profit per sale per customer. And when that occurs, and it takes a while to ramp that up, but when that occurs for a major auto company and captive finance arm, it's about a $500 million to $1 billion improvement, potential improvement in yield. So it starts to get to be a fairly significant number. And indirect lenders could benefit from this as well, but obviously not at these levels. But it's important to understand that manufacturers and their captive finance arms are moving in this direction. And then sort of the third step is a leap phase, which is really implementing that decision engine I showed you a little while ago. And that takes time. It could be a 3 to 5 year venture, but I can tell you a lot of autos are at least a year or two into this venture, and that can have significant rewards that certainly balance the cost. What we generally project, and these are very broad numbers, is the cost of any of these levels of investment in order to execute them are probably 5 to 10% of the savings on them. So I don't want to say it's a no-brainer investment, but it is a pretty solid investment. There's a lot of evidence that these things actually work. So that's why people are taking these things so seriously. So let me kind of, I think probably most people are interested in what they can do short term, and this probably from the audience's perspective is most relevant is digging a little bit deeper into this first phase of the process. So I'm going to dig into loan optimization and asset disposal optimization a little bit deeper to talk about how it's done and what the benefits are. And starting with loan price optimization modeling, this has really been around for a while in the financial services industry, but mainly with banks and insurance companies. And in recent years, auto finance has been getting more traction in this area, or it has been within the auto finance industry. And what it is it involves using advanced analytics to measure and forecast consumer price sensitivity on a segment or even an individual level. So, banks typically, they're looking at loan pricing from a risk and their profit model standpoint. So each of those two pieces they've been looking at, but they don't look at would the consumer be willing to pay a little bit more, or if we were willing to give a little bit on profit, would we make up that in volume, the difference and actually be ahead of the game if we lowered a particular interest rate. So what this does is this process really redesigns your loan price sheet. And we have some clients who have like 100, 200,000 different pricing cells. So that this piece goes into it. It doesn't change your profit models. It doesn't change your risk models. It just introduces the ability to look at different what-ifs to say if we either raised interest rates a little bit in one particular cell or one group of cells or lowered them, what would the impact be on demand, and then what would our overall profitability be? So that's kind of the general piece, and it can look at it on many different dimensions. It could be anything from credit score segment to loan product type and LTV and vehicle make, model, geography, all the way down to certain types of dealers and looking at it differently. And by having that in an advanced analytic environment, you can look at many, many, many different types of scenarios to see what is optimal for you, and assisted by, obviously computers and so forth, as opposed to people looking at spreadsheets and that sort of thing. Typically, this ends up delivering a 10 to 15 basis point gain in a loan portfolio. That's what we've seen. So, it gives you a sense of what the potential reward would be for your particular bank and so forth. So hopefully that gives you a little bit better sense of how loan price optimization modeling works. The second piece that I mentioned that could be done short term is in asset remarketing optimization. And really what this is designed to do is maximize profits by identifying the optimal timing, offer, target audience, particular type of customer or group, as well as pricing for disposal of your leased vehicles. So the idea is you're trying to get, as far upstream with disposal as you can with the best price to the right person at the right time. And so this process really takes you through that particular piece. And the output is generally, there's like 3 different areas that we have an output after we've looked at all of the data, and that is, portfolio segmentation is to be able to identify opportunity and risk segments within your portfolio that you should be concentrating on, that you could potentially lose money on if you don't handle it properly. Also, portfolio value is being able to look at, likely remarketing action of different types of segments and different groups, and taking a look at what the likely action that they're going to take and the margin on the predicted actions, and then looking at that collectively to be able to evaluate the value of your portfolio at particular times, and then again identifying any potential problem segments early on. And then finally, being able to go down to an individual customer basis and score them either on an individual customer or segment basis on most likely lease end action that they're likely to take, what the optimal price and terms would be for them to take that particular action, assuming that they might likely purchase the vehicle, and then ultimately what's the optimal timing to offer that to them. So that then feeds into your marketing strategies, you know, as far as marketing that vehicle or remarketing that vehicle to the person before it goes to different levels of disposal further down the chain, you know, et cetera. So that hopefully gives you a little bit of information on those two steps. And we think that those are two, I don't want to say no-brainer steps, but those are two steps you could take that would, you know, have very good short-term impact, and it begins to kind of set the pace for future deeper steps into improving profitability with advanced analytics. So generally, just to kind of recap, because we've talked about a bunch of different things, is we don't expect anyone to go out and do all this day one. And usually what it begins, and this is how we work with clients, whether you do this on your own or through other means, this is sort of the approach we take, is that we first do an assessment of maturity of the analytic practices across the entire enterprise, all the different areas we spoke about: loan pricing, asset disposal, incentive management, you know, retail sales optimization, et cetera. And what we do is we compare that to best practices in the marketplace, and then we identify what are the gaps between what you're currently doing today and what best practices could get you, and then we quantify or forecast rather the potential economic benefit. Because in some cases you find that, you know, what you're doing is good enough, or even if you became significantly more significant, it isn't going to have that much gain given, you know, the way your business is organized or the way your you know, customer base is configured, et cetera. Then based on that, we will create a go-forward plan that will start to lay the groundwork for moving into things like field testing or full implementation in particular areas, but it's usually kind of a step-by-step process. We don't suggest you go out and do all this day one, but that you create sort of a, you know, your own version of a crawl, walk, run strategy, et cetera. So hopefully this was helpful to everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and you know, potentially you know, help you move your analytics efforts forward and improve profitability. If you'd like to talk to us about any of these areas and more specific, we would love to. You can either contact myself or contact Scott Webke. He's our Director of North American Auto Finance, and his information's on the screen now. And again, we wish you the best of luck in your efforts to improve profitability and advance your analytics practices within your organization. Thank you very much.